Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome back. I was away, as you all know, and let's get back into it. There is one issue which you should know about. They changed the platform a little bit and added a few things, and so I'm not 100% sure that things are exactly the same. So if I lose you for some reason or another, just someone let me know through the chat, and we'll get together like that. But for the most part, it looks like the platform is more or less the same thing. So let's go. One of the things I wanted to talk about was actually a discussion I had last night with a few people. I have a meeting once a week with 3 scientists, and there's 2 rabbis and 3 scientists, and we discuss various issues. One of them is actually a biologist, actually quite a famous biologist. I'm not going to mention any names. Another one is a physicist who is a professor at university, and he teaches physics there, theoretical physics. And the third one is a mathematician who used to teach at Harvard. So these are quite high-level people, obviously, very high-level people, and they know what they're talking about. I'm not going to go through a discussion that we went through last night, but one thing came out of it that I think was actually very, very interesting. The physicist was telling me, or telling the group, that the idea of how you define truth in physics seems to be changing a little bit. Now, I'm not going to go into definitions. What I wanted to do was to explain the idea that came out, which is actually, interestingly enough, an idea that very much parallels the way things are in Kabbalah. So they said that there could be a few explanations of a phenomenon, all of which are true, even though they don't, on the surface of it, seem to agree with each other. Yeah, it was a great conversation, yes. There's a lot of arguments as well, but there's good conversation too, yes. So, let me put it in from the Kabbalistic perspective. Let's say we were talking about the way things are seen on the surface of things. In other words, let's just take a very very simple example. 1 + 1 = 2. You can't really argue with that. I don't think that anyone would think that's there's anything incorrect about such a statement. That would seem to be a statement that we would all agree to. 1 + 1 = 2. 100%. Okay, fine. Question is that all that there is to the issue? Or do we look a little bit deeper and ask 1 watt + 1 watt? Are we just talking about a number? We're talking about a mathematical properties, the property of 1 + 1? Or are we talking about something a little deeper? Who are the 2 individuals, the 2 things that are being added together? Are they just 2 inanimate objects, or perhaps even just 2 numbers? Or is there something a little bit more behind it? So we're looking at a deeper kind of a level. If you're looking simply at the surface of things, 1 + 1, well, that's not going to tell you very much. Yes, we know that the answer to that is 2, but if we look a little bit deeper and we look at what that 1 + 1 are, like what they represent, who they are, so to speak, then it can be a much more interesting conversation, because we're not only talking about the fact of the presence of something, presence in the real world or presence in a theoretical world of numbers, let's say, but we're talking about the character of something as well. We're talking about the characteristics. 1 watt + 1 watt, what are the 2 things that we're talking about, is I would suggest a much more interesting conversation. Take it a step further. not only are we interested in the characters that we're counting over here, not only their number, not only the character, what they are, but also why they are. Like, what is the meaning behind them? Why are they here? Why are they being counted? Why are they the focus of our current attention? That focus of attention, that meaning that we attempt to discover behind what these two individuals are, the why they are here, what they are here for, is again an even deeper level of explanation. Ultimately, however, that does not conclude the paradigm. There's one further step. What is the godliness that they represent? What is the transcendent, what is their transcendent aspect? In other words, what do they represent beyond themselves? What do they represent beyond themselves? Now, let me just go to perhaps more familiar terminology that would discuss this. We are familiar with the four worlds that are described in Hasidic terminology. I should actually have brought this up. One second, and while we're talking, I will get up a document. Let's see here. Yeah, I don't actually. Well, all right, never mind. I thought I had a document ready. I don't. Yeah, right, Shane. Good. Okay, let's talk about the worlds and what they mean. I'll just put it in the chat over here so that you can see. Anyone who's just listening to a recording, I don't know if you'll be able to see the chat, but here it is. Asiya is one level. Beria, Yetzira is the next world. Beria and Atzilut, right? And Atzilut. These are the four worlds. That's what's missing. Now I know I can't find it because I can't find my Dropbox. That's strange. All right, I'll have to figure this out later. Zoom updated itself and whatever. There was a whole bunch of things going on with my computer, so I had to remove Acrobat Adobe Reader and then reinstall it. So maybe I lost some files that way. We'll see. Okay. In any event, the idea is that there are four planes of existence, or four ways of looking at things. We already sort of described them. In the world of Asiya, you only know that the thing is. You know that there is something there. That's the world of Asiya. The explanation that applies to the world of Asiya is that this is a fact, right? This corresponds to something that there is in the world. That's the world of Asiya. The world of Yetzira takes a deeper level, takes a deeper look, and that deeper look is what this thing is, what it is. In other words, the word Yetzira comes from the word tzura. Tzura means the form or the shape thereof. So on the one hand, you have the outer surface of the thing, and now we're starting to look a little bit deeper into what the form of this thing is. What's it all about? What's its character? What's its nature? That is the world of Yetzira. On a much deeper level, when we want to understand the purpose of something, why it is here, what is it doing in the world, and why is it interacting with this other object, 1 + 1 = 2, that would be an explanation for the world of Bria. The explanation of, essentially, the explanation corresponding to the Sphira of Bina. Let me see here. Again, Sphirot. Yeah, here we go. All right, I think we got it now. I found the document. Okay, so that would correspond to the level of Bina. Here I'm going to put it up on the screen. I will share screen now. Let's see here, share screen. And here we go. Okay, here we go. As you can see in this diagram, can everybody see this? I hope so. So, as we can see, the 10 Sfirot, or 11 if you count Da'at. If you count, usually the way it works is we count Keter, we don't count Da'at. We count Da'at, we don't count Keter. Keter is the transcendent Sfira, and Da'at is the immanent representation of Keter. The immanent representation. So if we count Da'at, we don't count Keter. If we count Keter, we don't count Da'at, because there's 10. The Sefer Yetzirah says there are 10 and not 9, there are 10 and not 11. Very specifically wants you to know that the 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11. In other words, we don't count the transcendent with the immanent together. If we're counting the immanent, we only count the immanent. If we're counting the transcendent with the immanent, then we don't count the Sfira of Da'at. Okay, be that as it may. Let's go to the bottom of the picture over here where we're talking about Malchut. Oops. Where we're talking about Malchut. Malchut, right at the bottom over here, corresponds to the world of Asiya. As the Zohar, or the Tikkunei Zohar says, that Malchut nests in Asiya. Right? Malchut nests in Asiya. Oh, I keep on doing that. So Malchut nests in Asiya. And that means essentially that the place of Malchut, where Malchut is manifested, primarily is in the world of Asiya. So what is Malchut? Malchut is that Sfira which presents us with just the thing as it is. The outer surface of something without getting into the depth thereof. We will see later on, however, that Malchut has a special quality which none of the other Sfirot have except Keter. We'll get to that a little bit later, hopefully. So Malchut corresponds to the world of Asiya, the fact that the thing is. The world of Yetzirah, corresponding to all of these 6 Sfirot, or to the 6 Sfirot of, as you can see over here, Zer Anpin. Zer Anpin means the small visage, literally, which means it's a reflection of a certain level in Keter, which is called the large image, and this is the small image, or the small face, if you want to call it that. So that gives you the structure of the thing, the 6-sided aspect, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. That's the world of Yetzirah. So if we're giving you an explanation for the world of Malchut, we're just telling you the bare bones facts. When we come to the world of Yetzirah, we're not only giving you the facts, but what those facts are about, what each individual in that fact pattern comes to contribute to that fact. The nature of Chesed, the nature of Gvura, the nature of Tiferet, or Netzach, or Hod, or Yesod, what their nature is and what their function is. That's the world of Yetzirah. Then we go to the world of Beriah, which corresponds to the Sfira of Bina. Now, when we talk about the Sfira of Bina, Bina is translated usually as understanding. So this is the level at which we can understand the why of something. Previously, we were only talking about the fact that it is, or the what, right? The fact that it is and what it is the lower section of these of the Sfirot. It's the lower Sfirot that represent that. Already a much higher level, the level of Bria, is, and the level of Bina is the why the thing is, why it is there. Then we come to Chokhmah. Chokhmah corresponds to the world of Atzilut. As again the Tikkunei Zohar says, that Atzilut mekanana, Chokhmah mekanana ba'atzilut. The Sfira of Chokhmah nests in the world of Atzilut. In other words, what characterizes the world of Atzilut is the Sphira of Chokhmah. What's the Sphira of Chokhmah? So it's explained, one of the places that you can go and look this up actually, and it's worth looking up. If you have the book called Tanya, chapter 35 is primarily about the concept of Chokhmah, what it's all about, and there's a note in that chapter where he explains that Chokhmah is all about Hu levadohu ve'en zulato, which means he alone is and there is nothing else. In other words, Chokhmah experiences the presence of God and nothing else. That's all it's aware of. In other words, the Atzilut level of explanation explains how everything ultimately is godliness. So again, how everything is godliness ultimately, Chokhmah and Atzilut. Why it is there, the world of Bina. What it is, the world of Yetzirah, and that it is the world of Asiya. So those are four levels of explanation, which are called, in fact, in Kabbalah, they are called the Paradise. They're called the Paradise. If I can just, let me just get a blank document here and make the letters much bigger so you can see them clearly. So you have P-A-R-D-E-S, it would be called, right? Let's make it bold and be even bigger. Okay, everybody can see that, I assume, right? Paradise. Now, what does it stand for? What does Paradise stand for? So Paradise stands for these four levels rather, of explanation. The four levels of explanation. What are the four levels of explanation? So the first one is Peshat. Let's make it a little bit smaller now. Okay. Peshat, which is the simple or straightforward explanation of something. Okay? In other words, the surface of something, as you see it in the surface. That's Pshat. Then you get Remez. Remez means that it hints to something deeper. Remez means it's a hint. It hints to a deeper level, but Remez really explains to you what the thing is in the world of, again, this corresponds to the world of Asiya. Pshat corresponds to the world of Asiya. Remez corresponds to the world of Yetzirah. It's a higher level. It's a level of understanding, in essence, what the thing is. Then we get to Drash, which is the homiletical explanation. Hence the deeper explanation, let's put it. Okay. Drash is the homiletical explanation of something. In other words, how can we use these two these two previous levels, lower, because that's the bottom level, that's the next level up, that's the next level up. I'm going to invert them shortly. So, you know what, let me invert them now so that things are clearer. Pshat will go down at the bottom, and that's it. Okay, right. So there we go. So Drash is the homiletical explanation. In other words, what is the thing for? Why is it there? If you want to put it in personal sense, why am I here? There's a very famous TED Talk by someone called Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K. And he talks there about the why of things. Just ask why, I think it might be called, something like that. But if you just type Simon Sinek why in the TED Talks, you'll get to that talk, and it's very worthwhile looking at. And so, if you want to, if you have a little spare time, it's worth looking at that. It's worth watching that video. All right, the simple, straightforward explanation, which would be that it is what it is. This is what what it is. You know what? Let's just make these a little bit smaller. So, all right, there we go. And then we're going to get to Sod. Sod, the secret explanation. Right, the secret explanation is the Kabbalah. Okay, so the secret explanation, in other words, the godliness of the thing. How this, whatever it might happen to be, is a manifestation of what is the Hebrew Ein Od Milvado. There's nothing besides him with a capital H, nothing besides God. That's all there is. In various, now, this is not pantheism. It's not panentheism, which is another philosophy. It's not pantheism. Because all we're saying is that that's all there is. There's no, yes, we're created beings. We're created to see things in a certain way. But ultimately, Ein Od Milvado, there's nothing, it's a verse. There's nothing besides him. That's all there is. Okay, so, now, how does this correspond to levels of truth? We would say, I would imagine, we would, again, sorry, let me type in, that's Atzilut, that is Bria, that is Yetzira. If I type the whole word Yetzira, it's probably going to go on the next line. Yes, it is. All right, so we'll just make it smaller. Okay, and that is Asiya. Asiya. Okay, let's make it small enough that we get on the same line. Well, Asiya is much smaller than we thought. Okay, forget about that. That's the world of Asiya. Okay, so let's just call it the simple explanation that it is. Okay, that's Asiya. Okay, so how do these correspond to various levels of truth? Well, the interesting thing about truth is the sages tell us that the word truth, the word for truth in Hebrew is the word emet. Emet. Right? The word emet. Hope you can all see that. The word emet. Let me make it a bit bigger so you can see it more clearly. There we go. And let's put it in the middle. Right, so now the word emet is the first letter of the word, is the first letter of the alphabet. The last letter of the word is the last letter of the alphabet. And the mem in the middle is the middle letter of the alphabet. Now, the middle letter of the alphabet, when you count all the letters of the alphabet. Now, normally we count the letters of the alphabet as the 22 letters. But then there's another 5 letters which we add in called the female letters. Why there's the female letters? Because they come at the end of certain words. And they have 2 forms. They have a form like this, which is the way they appear in the middle of the word, and then they have the way they appear at the end of a word. So that would be like that, mem, nun, right? In other words, there's 2 forms. It could be, if it's in the middle of a word, it's like that. At the end of the word, it comes like that, the end forms. So, so just to, I'm sorry, to finish this off properly. Pei and Fei, and then Kaf and Chaf. All right, so these, when we add these other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 letters to the 22, so we get 27, right? When you add in these end letters, they're called the end letters, or the otiyot sofiyot in Hebrew, and abbreviated as a mansapach. Okay, so when we add in those end letters, then there's 27 letters of the alphabet. So 13 on each side, and the mem is in the middle, right? So the word emet, therefore, is the beginning, the middle, and the end, and there's no change between them. So now, that's the meaning, that's one of the meanings of the word emet. And in fact, the sages say that this God's seal, like his signet ring, his signet seal, is the word truth. Okay, so what does that mean? If there's 4 levels of explanation, 4 different levels of explanation, then aren't these 4 completely different approaches, and how can they all be true? And the answer is that they are all true, and that is the amazing thing about it. It's not that they're different explanations just looking from a different perspective. This is true. Pshat is true in the world of Remez as well, and Remez is true in the world of Pshat, even though in the world of Pshat, Remez might not be known. But in the world of Remez, Pshat is known, and they correspond to one another, just that this is on a deeper level. If this is just the number 1, this will tell you what that number is all about, what's the character thereof, right? Drash tells you what you're supposed to do with it, why it's there. But it's not a contradiction to its being there. In fact, its being there is a prerequisite for any of these other explanations. And similarly, the level of Sod, being the deepest explanation, contains all of these other ones and fits in completely with them. So what you have is kind of a hologram. All of the explanations fit one with the other. And if any of them are out of sync, then one of them is the wrong explanation. They all have to be exactly in sync. Now, this actually fits quite well with one of the explanations of truth in philosophy. There's truth, what's called truth, the correspondence theory of truth, which means that the thing corresponds to something that actually exists, but that would be simply on the lowest level. And then there's the I forget what it's called now, but it means that when everything sort of fits together, that would be the it's another philosophical term for explanation of what truth is, but they all fit together. So so in other words, both of those concepts of truth are covered over here. Now, why is this important to us? As we said before, these 4 over here make up the word paradise. Paradise literally means, if we translate it, of course, this means Pshat, this means Remez, Drush, and Sod, right? But the word paradise itself means orchard. Now, there's a famous story, which I've recounted several times in these classes, of the 4 sages who went into the orchard. That orchard wasn't just an ordinary orchard. It is called, traditionally in Kabbalistic terminology, the apple orchard, or the orchard of holy apples. Why holy apples? I don't want to go into the explanation too long, but basically the idea is that the orchard is not just an orchard of fruits in the literal sense of the word. It's the orchard of fruits of spiritual labor. Just as the orchard only grows when you plant the trees and you water them and you tend to them and so on and so forth, and they get enough sunlight and they get enough nourishment and so on from the ground and from water, then the fruits are produced. Similarly with spiritual endeavor, with the spiritual orchard, so to speak. The garden has to be tended. The seeds have to be sown. The gardens have to be tended. They have to be watered. They have to be exposed to sunlight, sufficient sunlight, and so on and so forth to cause them to grow. Now, what's this orchard? This orchard is essentially what they call, in English, the Garden of Eden. Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, or the Garden of Delights, if we translate it exactly. Gan Eden, the Garden of Delights. In other words, it's the delight of the soul in accessing the deepest levels of truth, to the extent that it merges into unadulterated, or unadulterated is the wrong word, unconcealed, non-concealed godliness, which is what Sod is all about. But it's not just thought as divorced from the reality of the world. It's thought and drash and remez and pshat all together. All of them form the ultimate truth. The surface level of things, the what it is, the why it is, and the godliness that it manifests. All of those together represent the concept ultimately of truth in Jewish thought. All of these together. And the journey, obviously, is to start off with the surface and to seek deeper and deeper explanations. There's a verse that says, Et panecha Hashem avakesh. I will seek out your countenance. Seek out your countenance means to seek out the countenance, the divine countenance. In other words, let's call it, instead of countenance, the divine encounter, right? Encountering God in our daily lives, even if it's not on a daily basis necessarily, but it should be at least sometime in our lives. We should have that divine encounter. And one can't really have it unless one looks for it. I mean, it can happen on some occasions, but one has to look for it primarily in order to achieve it. So that's the idea of truth in Jewish thought. It's a path that starts with ultimate godliness and is reflected all the way down through into the physical world as the most simple, straightforward explanation. And it is all of those things at the same time. It's all the world at the same time. It's not that any of the worlds is divorced from the others. They all form a continuum. And that continuum from top to bottom, from Aleph to Taf, with the mem in the middle, from the first letter to the last letter, with the middle letter of the Hebrew alphabet, all of those together form the truth. And that's what we seek. And that is called, in fact, the truth of truth, or emet la'amito, the truth of truth. So may we all look for it and enjoy it and experience it. So, are there any questions? If you have a question, yeah, synchronicity might be the way. Yes, Shane. There's a congruity. That's what it's called. Congruence. The congruence or the congruity theory of truth. But synchronicity would put it in terms of time more than, but very close. Yes. All right. Any questions? Any questions? Trying to word your question. Okay. How did they react to my contribution? Yeah, they agree that that's in fact the case. In fact, science is moving in that direction as well. Science is clearly moving in that direction, in the direction of layered explanations of things. Science is moving towards a spiritual dynamic, a spiritual realm, in a sense. I mean, all the three scientists say so. You know, there's no question about it. That's what's coming out of modern scientific endeavor, inquiry, and so on and so forth, is a recognition of a plane of spirituality, which science doesn't really explain that well at the moment. But they are kind of working on it. So we'll see what happens. All right. Any other questions? At the lowest level, as we rise through the level of truth, do we start to see the common source for a particular thing with another? How does that work? Yes. Yes, definitely. That ultimately everything merges into what I would guess you could call the divine reality from which it emerges. And very often you'll be able to trace two disparate things back to their original source, where you see that they're essentially one thing and not two things. In fact, there's a verse in Psalms that says, God spoke one utterance, and I heard two. Achas diber Elokim, shtaim zu shamati. God said one, I heard two. In other words, we hear the duality of the world, but their source is ultimately one. And part of our endeavor is to bring out the oneness underlying all things, which is the godliness underlying all things. Now we can understand this in by the following analogy. When I'm speaking something, when I say something, I speak linearly, right? I can't say all the words at the same time. You wouldn't hear anything. You just hear a noise if I said all the words at the same time. So I have to speak in a linear fashion, one word after the other. But when it comes to an image, all of the image is presented at the same time. That's the difference between malchut, which corresponds to speech, and chokhmah, which corresponds to vision or sight. Chokhmah corresponds to re'iyah or to sight. Bina corresponds to shmiya, to hearing. But chokhmah corresponds to sight. So the image thereof is all at once, whereas the explanation is essentially linear. So hot and cold are the same thing at different intensities, but say all the religions from the same source, and so do they merge at different levels. That needs a much longer explanation than I have to give now. I don't want to I don't want to give any misunderstanding now. So I'm going to let that question slide for now. But perhaps I will address it in the future. Let's put it this way. All truth comes from the same source. And we leave it at that. All truth comes from the same source. I don't want to get into religious discussions right now. It's just not, it's not productive, let's put it that way, in my opinion. Okay, Hakusan is observable, repeatable, and spiritual. To me, there should be somehow to be a synthetic union between the objective and the subjective. No, there does not necessarily have to be a synthetic union. If you say synthetic, when you say synthetic, you mean that synthetic could be understood in two different ways. Synthetic could be putting together something in a synthetic fashion, two things that don't really belong together. So it's it's synthetic in the sense of being fake, not original. Or perhaps you mean by synthetic, you mean from the word synthesis, that you combining things together. If the latter, then yes. If the latter, then for sure, yes. There's a synthesis between the objective and the subjective, yes. But when we say objective, what do we mean? All explanation for human beings is subjective. The only explanation which is not subjective is the way it is in the mind of the divine, in the mind of God. That's completely objective. In other words, that's the objective truth and not colored by my subjective state of consciousness. Hegelian synthesis to a certain extent, yes. Being in the earth but not of it, yes. Right. Being in the earth but not of it. That's an interesting expression, yes. Right. Which of these worlds relate to our dreams, which are all non-linear or timeless, non-dreamy or real world? Yeah, that's an interesting question. Mostly dreams are from the junk, the junk of Asiya. or even lower. However, prophetic dreams are definitely from the world of Yetzirah or higher or beyond. It very much depends. But the aspect of dream is, as you say, a sort of a chokhmah experience. Now, one of the things that is taught especially in the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, but it's also in the Arizal. I was actually studying this in the Arizal yesterday. In Otzrot Chaim, towards the end of Otzrot Chaim, he speaks about this a little bit. No, I'm sorry, it's not in Otzrot Chaim, it's in Shari Yehudim. So he speaks about this idea, the Arizal speaks about this idea of Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, the Arizal. Speaks about this idea of preparing oneself for sleep so that not only will the sleep be restful, but it'll be productive. Productive in the sense that you'll come to knowledge of things that you couldn't have had using your rational mind. Because what happens in sleep is that, the classic example, a camel can go through the eye of a needle, or an elephant through the eye of a needle, right? In a dream, but not in reality. So there's certain things that can be put together in dreams when the rational mind is asleep that would otherwise never appear that way, and that can lead to a much greater and deeper insight into things than one would otherwise have. And so the Arizal says that in order to prepare for that, one has to prepare oneself for that. The Baal Shem Tov also speaks about it. One of the preparations is going through your day at the end of the day and making an accounting of the whole day, right? Making an accounting of the day. A negative accounting and a positive accounting. What are the things that need improvement, and what are the things that were intrinsically good, that were intrinsically great, that were intrinsically beneficial? And of course, the best way to do this is to start off with the things that need improvement. I spoke this kind of way to such and such a person, and it was inappropriate. It didn't improve our relationship, didn't whatever, that kind of thing, and start looking through the day from the beginning of the day. Obviously, you have to go through it quite fast. It'll take you another whole day to do it, but just the main features of the day that were negative, that need improvement, and perhaps even write those down. And what parts of the day, and end off with what parts of the day were good. What kind of good things did I do? How did I make somebody else in a better mood? How did I do the right thing when I had a choice? What was the situation where instead of blowing up, I reacted in a calm fashion and stated my opinion without cursing anybody else out or making anyone feel bad or whatever, those kinds of things. But end off on a positive note and then go to sleep. And then our result says, if you do that, there's no doubt that you're going to wake up in a far better mood than you normally do. You wake up on the right side of the bed, so to speak. There's all kinds of other things that he suggests as well. But that is definitely the first one. One thing that one shouldn't do before going to sleep is watch horror movies. That'll lead to the other kind of things, Terry, that you were speaking about. So, which of these was related to our dreams? We don't know. Non-linear, timeless versus non-dreaming or real world. So again, the real world, there's four real worlds. You can't say any one of them is not real. All of them are real. Only they're real in a different sense. In a dream, 1 + 1 can have so many different answers. And 1 + 1 can have many different answers, probably, in some sense. 1 + 1 does not necessarily have to equal 2. 1 + 1 can equal 1, for example. How so? Because 1 + 1, if it's the same one, if it's the same thing, It's still only one, yeah, but 1 plus 1, whatever. Let's not get into it now, but I'm sure you can understand what I mean. Gaining an insight or truth from something seemingly irrational, yeah. Like people's behaviors generally, people behave very often in a very irrational way. We all do behave in irrational ways, but the idea of we're moved by our emotions more than by our intellect, by our thought processes, and the idea is to bring those emotional outbursts into line with what is logical to do and what is beneficial. Okay. Is a Kabbalistic connection to the concept of sleeping being 1/60th of death? Yes, absolutely there is. Not all of you can see these questions because some questions are sent privately, that's fine. But is there a Kabbalistic connection to the concept of sleeping being 1/60th of death? The sages say that when one sleeps, one is 1/60th part dead. Yeah, no, it can happen that when you're sleeping and someone, like when your alarm clock tries to wake you up, I think it's probably more than a 60th. No, a little bit more than a 60th dead. There is a Kabbalistic connection to the concept of 1/60th of death. 1/60th of death is not necessarily meant in a bad sense. It can be meant in a bad sense also, because after one wakes up, your hands are actually tome, they're spiritually impure, and then they should be washed 3 times consecutively from a cup. In other words, right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand, in order to purify the hands. The Hasidic custom is to do that by your bed, even before you get up. So that when you get up, you put your feet on the floor in a state of purity. So the Kabbalistic connection to the 1/60th of death, there's 1/60th of death in the sense of waking up with impurity. On the other hand, the 1/60th of death is the 1/60th that we are released from our rational constraints in a positive sense. We are released from certain physical and rational constraints in a positive sense. So we can be a sort of a 60th released. Why a 60th more than anything else? Why 60? Why 1 part in 60? Well, 1 part in 60 is important in Jewish law, but the word the number 60 is very much related to the word in Hebrew, the word kli. Let me just, kli. Kli is the letter kaf. Kaf equals 20. 1 second. Kaf equals 20. Lamed equals 30. And Yud, I keep on typing it in Hebrew. Yud equals 10. Right, so that's 60 equals 60. That's the gematria of Kli. So Kli, 60. That's what the concept of 60 is. You become a vessel for certain things that you weren't a vessel for when you were awake. Your rational mind interferes to a certain extent with your ability to comprehend things beyond the rational mind. And when we're asleep, that 60th part of death can be viewed as something positive. It's achieving a little bit of transcendence. It's a vessel for some level of transcendence. Okay, last question. Does the hand washing ritual indicate that we've been somewhat unclean while sleeping? Personally, I found sleep part of the work. Sometimes letting go of stuff and letting the subconscious work on it while I sleep is indeed a godsend. Yes, absolutely it is. No question about that. There's no question about that. But wait a second. Did I? Oh, wait. I sent this message privately. Sorry, my mistake. This should have gone to everybody. Just a second here. Ugh. All right. It was okay. Just 1 second. To everyone. Sorry. Yeah, this was supposed to go to everybody. There we go. And here's the word kli. Kli. That's kaf, and that equals. That equals 60. Okay. Oh, not 1060. Sorry about that. That's not 1060, it's 10, and that all equals 20, 30, 10 equals 60. Okay. The hand washing ritual, yes, it could be. Yes, sleep is definitely part. It's necessary to sleep. There's no question about it. Very few people are able to survive without any sleep at all. They say that Lubavitcher Rebbe used to sleep maybe 2 hours a night, and his wife went in. She sort of forced him to lie down. Part of the night, and she said often when she went in, the 2.5 hours that he was supposedly asleep, he had his eyes wide open. He was just lying on his bed to make his wife happy, but his eyes were wide open and he wasn't asleep. People who easily enter into a meditative state need far less sleep than most others. But definitely sleep has two possibilities. If the soul ascends during sleep, which is the whole purpose of placing your soul in God's hands, so to speak, when you go to sleep, then when it comes back into the body, that's when it becomes impure. It's because of the body, not because of the soul, and therefore one washes one's hands. But in any event, washing one's hands in the morning like that is that method of purification is very beneficial for whatever reason. It's done. All right, folks, we'll have to leave it here. As everybody probably knows, Sunday is a fast day. It's the 9th of Av actually comes out on Saturday on the Sabbath, on Shabbat, and the observance of that day, the very day of mourning, the day of the destruction of the temple, the first and second temples. So it's a day of great mourning. That will take place on Sunday instead, because the Sabbath pushes away that day of mourning. In any event, classes will continue again on Thursday next week, God willing. All righty. Have a great one, everybody. Good night. You're welcome.